Marcus Brennan stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office overlooking Manhattan, phone pressed to his ear, listening to another agency. Representative apologized for wasting his time. "Mr. Brennan, I'm sorry, but after reviewing your situation more carefully, we simply don't have anyone qualified for quadruplets with level 3 autism," Marcus finished flatly. "Yes, I'm aware of what I'm asking. It's not just the diagnosis, sir. It's that you've gone through 37 caregivers in 18 months. Our professionals are afraid." Marcus's voice was cold, controlled. "Your professionals are afraid of 4 6-year-old children." The woman on the other end went quiet. Marcus could hear her breathing, choosing her words carefully. "Mr. Brennan, with all due respect, your children have very complex needs. The behaviors you've described, the self-injury, the complete lack of eye contact, the violent meltdowns, these require specialists, not just caregivers. And honestly, the turnover rate suggests that perhaps the environment itself is..." Marcus ended the call. He stood there in his $2,000 suit, in his office that overlooked half of New York City, CEO of a tech company worth $3.7 billion, and he couldn't find a single person willing to help his children. The irony wasn't lost on him. His phone buzzed. A text from Gerald, his head of household staff. "Another incident. Olivia quit. She's already gone." That made 38. Marcus grabbed his briefcase and left without a word to his assistant, ignoring the afternoon meetings that would cost his company millions. Money he could make back tomorrow. Time with his children, time they might actually be present for, that was something no amount of money could buy. The drive to Greenwich took 43 minutes. 43 minutes of Marcus replaying the neurologist's words from 3 years ago. "Mr. Brennan, I need you to understand all 4 children presenting with severe autism simultaneously is extraordinarily rare. The prognosis for this level of impairment is complicated. They may never speak, may never make eye contact, may never recognize you as their father. Some children improve with intensive intervention. But with quadruplets all at this severity level, your expectations need to be realistic." Realistic meant accepting that his children were unreachable. Realistic meant the woman he'd loved, the woman who'd carried 4 babies and delivered them into this world, had walked away 8 months after diagnosis because she couldn't bear to look at children who would never look back. Realistic meant Marcus Brennan, who'd built an empire from nothing, who'd solved problems that made other men quit, had exactly 0 solutions for the only problem that actually mattered. He pulled through the gates of his estate, 12,000 square feet of architectural perfection, sitting on 6 acres, and felt the familiar weight settle on his chest. This house that was supposed to be filled with laughter and family dinners and children playing in the backyard was instead a sterile monument to failure, beautiful and utterly empty. Gerald met him at the door, face drawn with exhaustion. The man was 62, had been with Marcus since the beginning, and in the past 18 months had aged a decade. "Where are they?" Marcus asked. "Separate rooms, sir." After Olivia left, they dispersed. Ethan's in the library. Mason's under the dining room table. Caleb locked himself in the upstairs bathroom. Asher's in the playroom, but he's... Gerald's voice caught. "He's hitting his head against the wall again, sir. I tried to stop him, but he's so strong now, and I didn't want to restrain him without you here." Marcus took the stairs 3 at a time. The playroom was at the end of the hall, doors reinforced with padding after Caleb had broken his hand punching through the original ones. Marcus could hear the rhythmic thud before he reached it. Steady, mechanical, the sound of his son's head hitting the padded wall. Thud, thud, thud. Marcus opened the door carefully. Asher sat in the corner, 6 years old, beautiful blonde hair, perfect features, rocking back and forth with his eyes squeezed shut, slamming his head backward against the wall with terrifying precision. "Hey, buddy," Marcus said softly, keeping his voice level even though his heart was breaking. "Dad's home." No response, not even a flicker of recognition. Marcus moved slowly, sat down on the floor 6 feet away, close enough to intervene if needed, far enough not to trigger a worse meltdown. He'd learned through trial and error, through bruises and bites and shattered hope, exactly how to approach his own children, like they were wild animals instead of his sons. "It's okay," Marcus whispered, though he didn't know if it was true. "You're safe. Dad's here." Thud, thud, thud. Asher's forehead was already red, already swelling. Marcus watched his son hurt himself and couldn't stop it because stopping it would make it worse. The specialists had explained. Sometimes the sensory input from self-injury was the only thing that made the world tolerable for them. Taking it away too abruptly could cause complete psychological breakdown. So Marcus sat there, in his expensive suit, in his mansion filled with every resource money could buy, and watched his 6-year-old son bash his head against a wall. After 11 minutes, Marcus counted every second. Asher's movements slowed. The rocking continued, but the head-banging stopped. His hands came up to cover his ears, fingers pressed so hard the knuckles went white. Marcus waited another 5 minutes before moving closer, inch by inch, slow enough not to startle. When he was within arm's reach, he pulled out the weighted blanket Gerald kept nearby and gently draped it over Asher's lap. His son's fingers twitched. He grabbed the blanket, pulled it tight around himself, and his rocking slowed to a gentle sway. Marcus sat beside him, not touching, never touching unless Asher initiated it and fought the urge to weep. This was his life now. 4 brilliant, beautiful children, trapped inside bodies and brains that wouldn't let them connect. 4 boys who'd never called him dad, never hugged him, never looked into his eyes and smiled. 4 sons who didn't know their father loved them because they couldn't understand what love meant. Marcus stayed with Asher until the boy's breathing evened out into something close to calm. Then he went to find the others. Mason was still under the dining room table, arranging and rearranging 63 toy cars in a line. The same 63 cars, the same exact order. If anyone moved one, he'd scream for hours. Caleb had unlocked the bathroom, but was now spinning in circles in his bedroom, arms flapping, making a high-pitched sound that drilled into Marcus's skull. Ethan sat in the library, stacking blocks into a tower, knocking them down, stacking them again, over and over. His face completely blank, eyes focused on the blocks but not really seeing them. This was his family. 4 children who existed in separate worlds Marcus couldn't enter. By the time Marcus made it back downstairs, Gerald had tea ready. The older man's hands shook slightly as he poured. "I contacted 6 more agencies today," Gerald said quietly. "They all declined. One suggested a residential facility." Marcus's jaw clenched. "Never, sir. I'm not suggesting. They're my sons. They belong here, at home, not in some institution." "Of course, sir." Gerald sat down heavily. "But we need help. I'm 62 years old, and I physically cannot manage 4 6-year-olds having simultaneous meltdowns. And you're working 80-hour weeks trying to keep the company afloat. Something has to change." Marcus pressed his palms against his eyes. Gerald was right. He was always right. But what was the alternative? There were no more agencies to call, no more specialists to consult. They'd tried everything: ABA therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, sensory integration, special diets, supplements, weighted vests, visual schedules. Nothing worked, or more accurately, nothing worked well enough to make a real difference. "There's one more option," Gerald said carefully, "and I hesitate to even mention it, because it's unconventional. Tell me, there's a woman. She's been sleeping in the chapel at St. Catherine's for the past 6 weeks. Father Morrison mentioned her, said she's fallen on hard times, lost everything, but she's been volunteering with the church's community outreach program, helping with their special needs children's ministry." Marcus looked up. "A homeless woman. A woman with nowhere to go," Gerald corrected gently. "Father Morrison says she has a gift with difficult children, says she got the Patterson boy to make eye contact for the first time in 3 years. And the Rodriguez twins stopped their aggressive behaviors within 2 weeks of her working with them. She has credentials. None. No degree, no certifications. Just," Gerald paused, "patience, apparently, and time. Lots of time." Marcus laughed bitterly. "So after 38 trained professionals have failed, you want me to hire a homeless woman with no qualifications? I want you to consider," Gerald said firmly, "that maybe credentials don't matter as much as we think they do. Maybe your sons don't need another expert telling them what's wrong with them. Maybe they need someone who's got nothing to lose and all the time in the world to figure out what's right with them." If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. 2 days later, Marcus stood in his security office, watching live feeds from 17 cameras strategically placed throughout his house. Every room except bedrooms and bathrooms, every angle covered. Motion sensors that sent alerts to his phone, a system that cost more than most people's homes. He'd installed it after caregiver number 12 had sold photos of the twins to a tabloid. After caregiver number 19 had posted videos of Caleb's meltdowns on social media for awareness. After caregiver number 23 had stolen prescription medications and jewelry worth $40,000. Trust was a luxury Marcus Brennan could no longer afford. He scrolled through the logs, watching the time-stamped history of his sons' lives reduced to silent surveillance footage. There was Ethan at 3:47 a.m., wandering the hallway, Mason at 2:15 p.m., spinning in circles for 41 minutes straight, Caleb at 6:23 p.m., throwing his dinner plate against the wall while Gerald tried to calm him, Asher at 11:04 p.m., sitting alone in the dark playroom, rocking, always rocking. Marcus had become obsessed with these feeds. He'd watch them late at night when sleep wouldn't come, studying his children like they were strangers, looking for clues, patterns, some key he'd missed that would unlock the mystery of reaching them. He'd never found it. The intercom buzzed, Gerald's voice. "Sir, she's here." Marcus switched to the front entrance camera. A woman stood on his doorstep with a garbage bag full of what he assumed were her possessions. She was maybe 40, black, thin, in a way that spoke of meals skipped rather than diets followed. Her clothes were clean but worn jeans with frayed hems, a sweater with a small hole near the collar, sneakers that had seen better years, and in her hands, gripped like a lifeline, was a Bible so worn the cover was held on with tape. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. This woman had nothing, was nothing, by the world's standards, and he was about to invite her into his home to care for the most precious things in his life. He must be insane. But desperation makes people do insane things. Marcus watched through the cameras as Gerald opened the door. As the woman rose, her name was Rose Carter, smiled softly, and said something that made Gerald's stern face soften slightly, watched as she followed him inside, her eyes moving across the marble entryway, the vaulted ceilings, the chandelier that cost more than she'd probably made in 5 years. She didn't look impressed, didn't look intimidated. She looked sad, like all this wealth made her sad. Marcus met them in his study. Rose stood with her garbage bag of belongings, meeting his eyes with a directness that surprised him. Most people who needed something from him approached with either desperation or calculation. She had neither. "Miss Carter," Marcus said, gesturing to a chair. "Please sit." "Thank you, Mr. Brennan." Her voice was quiet but steady, southern accent, Georgia maybe. She sat, placed her bag on the floor beside her, kept her Bible in her lap. "I'm going to be direct," Marcus began. "I've had 38 caregivers in 18 months. Every single one quit. My sons have severe autism, all 4 of them. They don't speak, don't make eye contact. They engage in self-injurious behaviors. They have violent meltdowns that last hours. They've bitten, scratched, kicked, and thrown objects at the people trying to help them. They've destroyed thousands of dollars in property, and they've broken the spirit of every trained professional who's tried to reach them." He leaned forward. "Father Morrison says you have a gift with special needs children, but I need you to understand what you'd be walking into. This isn't a gift situation. This is a war zone, and if you're not prepared for that, I'd rather you walk away now before my sons get attached to another person who's going to leave." Rose listened quietly. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke. "Mr. Brennan, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why do you think they hurt themselves?" The question caught him off guard. "Because of sensory processing issues. Because—" "No," Rose interrupted gently. "I mean, why do you think they choose to hurt themselves instead of hurting you?" Marcus went still. Children who've been hurt by the world, they got 2 choices. They can hurt others, or they can hurt themselves. Your boys, they're hurting themselves. That tells me something important. It tells me they still got love inside them. They just don't know how to let it out." She looked down at her Bible, traced the broken spine with one finger. "I lost everything 2 years ago. Lost my husband to cancer, lost my home, lost my daughter to the state because I couldn't provide for her no more. I tried to end my life 3 times because I thought broken was the same as finished." Her eyes met his again, and Marcus saw something there he recognized. Grief that had carved away everything soft. "But God kept me alive, kept putting me in front of children who were just as broken as me, and I learned something. The most broken people make the best healers, not because we got all the answers, because we know what it's like to be the question nobody wants to answer." Marcus's throat went tight. "I can't pay you much. My liquid assets are tied up in the company, and—" "I don't need much," Rose said simply. "Roof over my head, 3 meals a day. That's more than I got now. There are cameras everywhere, Marcus warned. I'll be watching, every moment. I won't risk another person hurting my children or exploiting them. Then you'll see everything I do, Rose said calmly. The good and the bad. The times I succeed and the times I fail. I got nothing to hide. Marcus studied her face, looking for deception, for calculation, for any sign this was a con, an angle, another person who'd take what they could and disappear. He found none. When can you start? He asked. Right now, Rose said. If you'll have me. Marcus stood. Gerald will show you to your room. The boys are in various locations throughout the house. They won't approach you. They won't acknowledge you. They might scream when they see you. That's normal. Rose stood, picked up her garbage bag. Mr. Brennan? Yes? Those cameras? They're going to show you a lot. But they won't show you everything. Some things, the most important things, can't be captured on video. You're going to have to trust that I'm doing right by your boys even when you can't see it. I don't trust easily, Miss Carter. I know, she said softly. Your boys don't either. That's going to make us all have to work harder. Marcus watched through the cameras as Gerald led Rose to the small guest room on the 3rd floor, watched her unpack her garbage bag. 3 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, a photo of a little girl that must be her daughter, and that worn Bible. That was it. Everything this woman owned fit in a garbage bag, and she was about to try to reach children that 38 professionals couldn't help. Marcus pulled up the camera feeds, arranged them so he could see every room simultaneously, and settled in to watch. This would either be the biggest mistake of his life, or the last hope his family had. He'd know which within days. Rose's first day was exactly what Marcus expected. Chaos. She entered the playroom where all 4 boys had been corralled by Gerald. They didn't look up, didn't acknowledge her existence. Ethan continued stacking blocks. Mason lined up his cars. Caleb spun in circles. Asher rocked in the corner, hands over his ears. Rose didn't try to touch them, didn't force interaction. She simply sat on the floor, opened her Bible, and began reading aloud. Not children's stories, verses, her voice low and rhythmic, almost musical. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Marcus watched through the cameras as his sons continued their separate activities, seemingly unaware of her presence. After an hour, Rose closed the Bible and began humming. Old hymns, the kind his grandmother used to sing. Nothing changed that day, or the next, or the day after that. But Marcus noticed something on day 4. Caleb's spinning had slowed. He was still spinning, but now he was spinning near Rose instead of across the room. Close enough that if he'd reached out, he could have touched her. He didn't reach out, but he was closer. On day 7, Mason brought one of his 63 cars and placed it on the floor next to Rose's leg. Not in her hand, not as a gift, just near her. Then he went back to his line and continued his precise arrangements. Marcus rewound the footage 3 times, studying it. The specialists had said his sons would never initiate proximity, would never share space voluntarily. But there was Mason, choosing to place something precious in Rose's orbit. On day 11, Marcus was reviewing overnight footage, and his heart stopped. 3:47 a.m. Ethan wandering the hallway like he did every night, but this time he didn't wander aimlessly. He walked to Rose's door, stood outside it for 9 minutes, rocking gently. Then he sat down, pressed his back against her door, and fell asleep right there in the hallway. Rose must have heard something because at 4:15 a.m. her door opened. She looked down at Ethan sleeping against her doorframe. Marcus watched her face through the hallway camera, watched her press her hand to her mouth, watched her sink down beside Ethan, not touching him, just sitting nearby, and stay there for the next 2 hours until he woke up. When Ethan's eyes opened, he looked directly at Rose for exactly 3 seconds before looking away. But 3 seconds of eye contact from a child who'd never made eye contact with anyone was a miracle. Marcus called the developmental pediatrician who'd last evaluated the boys 6 months ago. "Dr. Patterson, I need you to come observe something." The doctor arrived that afternoon. Marcus led her to the observation room where she could watch the camera feeds without being seen. They watched Rose in the playroom with all 4 boys. She was singing now. Amazing Grace. Her voice wasn't perfect, but it was full of something the boys seemed to feel. Asher's rocking had synced to the rhythm. Caleb had stopped spinning and was swaying instead. Mason had abandoned his cars and was humming, actually humming along with her. And Ethan had moved to sit 3 feet away from Rose, watching her mouth form the words. Dr. Patterson leaned forward. "How long has this been happening?" 2 weeks, Marcus said. "What am I seeing?" "Regulation," Dr. Patterson breathed. "She's helping them regulate their nervous systems. The rhythm, the predictable melody, the gentle voice, it's creating safety. Mr. Brennan, I've never seen all 4 of them calm simultaneously. This is extraordinary. But they still don't speak, still don't make sustained eye contact. Yet," Dr. Patterson said firmly. "They don't yet. But Mr. Brennan, what I'm watching is neurological change happening in real time. Whatever she's doing, don't stop her." Marcus watched for another hour, watched Rose move slowly around the room, tidying toys while continuing to hum. Watched Caleb follow her movement with his eyes. Watched Mason deliberately place a car in her path, not random, but intentional. Watched Asher's hands drop from his ears for the first time in weeks. Something was happening. Something the specialists said was impossible. That night, Marcus did something he'd never done before. He knocked on Rose's door. She opened it, surprised. "Mr. Brennan, is something wrong?" "No, I wanted to say thank you for what you're doing with them." Rose smiled softly. "I'm not doing nothing special, just loving them. It's working. Whatever it is, it's working. It's working because they're ready," Rose said gently. "They've been waiting for someone who wouldn't give up on them. You didn't give up either, Mr. Brennan. You kept looking until you found what they needed." Marcus's eyes burned. "I'm going to increase your pay, whatever you need." "I don't need nothing but what you already giving me," Rose interrupted. "But there is something you could do. Anything. Spend time with them, not watching through cameras. Actually in the room. They need to know their daddy loves them." The words hit like a physical blow. "They don't even know I exist." "They know," Rose said firmly. "They just don't know how to show you they know. But they're learning. Give them time. Give yourself time." Week 4. Marcus came home early from a meeting in Boston, a merger that would add $200 million to his company's valuation. But all he could think about was getting home to see his sons. He pulled into the driveway at 2:30 p.m., earlier than usual. The house was quiet when he entered. Too quiet. Then he heard it. Laughter. High-pitched, pure, unmistakable child laughter coming from the playroom. Marcus's briefcase hit the floor. His legs moved without conscious thought, carrying him down the hallway. Each step felt like walking through water, through time itself, through every impossible hope he'd buried for 3 years. He reached the doorway and looked inside. All 4 of his sons were sitting in a circle with Rose, not just near her in physical contact. Asher had his hand on her knee. Caleb was leaning against her shoulder. Mason sat in her lap. And Ethan was looking directly into Rose's eyes, smiling while she sang and clapped a rhythm. Pat a cake, baker's man." And his sons who'd never imitated anything, who'd never engaged in reciprocal play, were clapping along. Their movements uncoordinated, imperfect, but deliberate, intentional, connected. Rose's hands met Asher's in a clap, then Caleb's, then Mason's, then Ethan's. They were playing, together, as a group, with joy on their faces. Marcus's phone slipped from his hand, clattered on the hardwood floor. Rose looked up. Their eyes met across the room, and she smiled, not surprised, not worried, just peaceful, like she'd been expecting him, like she wanted him to see this. But Marcus couldn't process it, couldn't breathe. His knees buckled and he grabbed the doorframe, vision blurring, chest cracking open with something too big to contain. His sons were alive. Not just existing alive, present, connected, happy. The sound that came out of him was half sob, half laugh. His legs gave out completely, and he sank to his knees right there in the doorway, hands pressed against his face, shaking with 3 years of grief and hope and love and loss, pouring out all at once. "Daddy?" The word froze time. Marcus's head snapped up. Ethan was looking directly at him, making full eye contact, pointing. "Daddy," crying, Ethan said. Clear, deliberate, his first words in 6 years. Mason turned to look. "Daddy home." Caleb climbed off Rose's shoulder. "Daddy sad." Asher stood up on wobbly legs. "Hug Daddy?" Marcus couldn't speak, couldn't move, could only watch through tears as all 4 of his sons, his boys who'd never touched anyone willingly, who'd never shown affection, who'd never acknowledged his existence, walked toward him. Asher reached him first. Small hands grabbed Marcus's face, studying him with those blue eyes that had never looked at him before. Daddy, okay. Marcus pulled Asher into his arms and broke completely. The other three piled on, wrapping around him, their small bodies warm and real and present. Daddy, love us? Mason asked. Yes, Marcus sobbed into their hair. Yes, God, yes. I love you so much. So much. We love Daddy, Caleb said simply, like it was obvious, like they'd always loved him and were just waiting for permission to show it. Marcus looked up through his tears. Rose stood in the doorway watching, her own face wet, hands clasped over her heart. How? Marcus whispered. How did you do this? I didn't do nothing, Mr. Brennan. I just loved them until they remembered how to love back. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. That night, after the boys were finally asleep in their beds, not rocking, not spinning, Marcus sat in his study with a glass of whiskey he couldn't drink and a truth he couldn't swallow. A stranger had accomplished what he couldn't. A homeless woman with no credentials had reached his children in 4 weeks while he'd failed for 6 years. The thought grew teeth, burrowed deep. By morning, it had transformed into something ugly. He found Rose in the kitchen making breakfast. The boys were at the table, actually eating and chattering in their limited way. Miss Carter, I need to speak with you, privately. Something in his tone made the boys go quiet. Rose's smile faded. Of course. In his study, Marcus closed the door, crossed his arms, made himself into the CEO, not the grateful father. I've been reviewing the footage, he began coldly, and I have concerns. Rose waited, face calm. You're creating dependency. The boys are becoming too attached to you. What happens when you leave? When you decide this life isn't for you? They'll regress. They'll be worse than before. I'm not leaving, Mr. Brennan. Everyone leaves, Marcus snapped. You'll meet someone, want your own life back, realize you don't want to spend your days caring for someone else's damaged children. Don't call them that. Rose's voice was quiet but sharp. Don't you ever call them damaged. That's what they are. That's what the doctors said. That's what 38 professionals couldn't fix. And somehow you, his voice cracked, you did in a month what I couldn't do in 6 years. What kind of father does that make me? Understanding dawned on Rose's face. This isn't about me leaving. This is about you feeling like you failed. I did fail, Marcus shouted. I'm their father and I failed them. And you just walked in like some kind of saint and made it look easy. It wasn't easy, Rose said firmly. And I'm not a saint. I'm just someone who had nothing left to lose so I could give everything. You had too much to protect your company, your reputation, your pride. That made you afraid. And children who are afraid can feel when adults are afraid too. Marcus's jaw clenched. I'm terminating your employment, effective immediately. Rose went very still. Mr. Brennan, please don't do this. I'll pay you 6 months' salary, help you find housing, but I need you to leave. Today, now, before the boys wake up from their naps. They're going to ask for me. They'll adjust. The lie tasted like ash. Rose's eyes filled with tears. I love those boys. That's exactly the problem. They can't love you back. Not really. They're autistic. This is just behavior modification, conditioning. It's not real. You don't believe that, Rose whispered. Pack your things, Miss Carter. She left without another word. Marcus watched through the cameras as she went to her room, placed her 3 outfits back in the garbage bag, picked up her worn Bible, and walked down the stairs. Gerald met her at the door, confusion on his face. Marcus watched Rose say something to him, watched Gerald's expression shift to horror, watched him grab her arm, say something urgent. Rose shook her head, touched Gerald's face gently, then walked out the door. The boys woke up an hour later. Where Rose? Asher asked immediately. Marcus's stomach turned. She had to go away for a little while. When she come back? Mason's face was already crumpling. I don't know. Ethan's eyes went wide, started rocking. Rose gone? Rose leave? No, she didn't leave. She just... Caleb started screaming. The sound Marcus hadn't heard in 4 weeks came roaring back, tearing through the house like a siren. Within seconds, all 4 boys were in full meltdown. Asher ran to the wall, started hitting his head. Mason threw his cars, all 63 of them, scattering chaos. Ethan curled into a ball, hands over his ears, making that high-pitched keening sound. Caleb spun and spun and spun until he vomited. It took 3 hours for them to exhaust themselves. 3 hours of Marcus trying everything Rose had done, humming, singing, speaking softly, and having it all fail. Because it wasn't about the technique, it was about trust, and he'd just destroyed the only trust they'd learned to build. That night, Marcus found a drawing under Asher's bed, 4 stick figures holding hands, 1 tall figure labeled in Rose's handwriting, Rose, 4 smaller figures, Asher, Ethan, Mason, Caleb, and 1 figure standing apart, alone, labeled Daddy. Marcus pressed his fist against his mouth and wept. Gerald found Marcus at 3 a.m., sitting in the dark playroom where his sons used to play with Rose. "They won't eat, sir. It's been 2 days. "I know. Asher's head is bleeding from hitting the wall." Caleb bit through his lip. "They're asking for her every hour." "I know," Marcus whispered. "Then bring her back." "I can't. She thinks I believe my sons are damaged. She thinks I fired her because—" He stopped. "She's right. I did. I was jealous of a homeless woman because she could reach my children and I couldn't." Gerald sat down heavily. "Sir, I've worked for you for 15 years. I've watched you build an empire, watched you lose your wife, watched you fight for those boys every single day, and in all that time, I've never called you a fool." He turned to look at Marcus. "But if you don't go find that woman and bring her back, you'll be the biggest fool I've ever met." "She won't come back." I humiliated her, told her the boys couldn't really love her. "Then you'll beg," Gerald said firmly. "You'll get on your knees and beg like a man who knows he's lost everything that matters." Marcus drove to Street Catherine's at dawn. Father Morrison directed him to a shelter 3 miles away. Rose was in a bed with 40 other women, her garbage bag of belongings under her pillow. When she saw Marcus, her face closed. "No, please, just listen." I said no. "I'm not going back there to be told those beautiful boys can't love, can't feel, can't—" "You were right," Marcus interrupted, his voice breaking. "About everything. I was scared, scared of failing, scared that you could reach them and I couldn't, scared that I'd already lost them before you came. And when you proved me wrong, when you showed me they were still there, still reachable, I couldn't handle it." Rose's jaw was set. "So you fired me and broke their hearts." "I broke all our hearts," Marcus whispered. "Mine included. Rose, my sons haven't eaten in 2 days. They're asking for you every hour. Asher's hurt himself so badly I had to take him to the hospital. And they all drew pictures of you last night. Pictures of you as their—" He couldn't say it. "Their what?" Rose demanded. "Their mother," Marcus breathed. "They drew you as their mother. All 4 of them, separately, without talking to each other. They drew you holding their hands. They drew you singing. They drew you smiling at them. And they drew me standing alone outside the circle because that's what I am. I'm outside. And I put myself there." Tears streamed down Rose's face. "I'm not asking you to come back as an employee," Marcus continued. "I'm asking you to come back as family, because that's what you are to them. That's what they need. And God help me, that's what I need too. Someone who knows how to love broken things until they're whole again." He pulled out a small box, opened it. Inside was a simple gold ring with 4 small blue stones. "These are their birthstones. Sapphires. I had this made 3 days before I fired you because I was going to ask you to stay. Officially, legally, as their mother. As—" he swallowed hard, "as my wife, if you'd have me. Not because I love you, though I think I do, but because they love you, and I can't take that away from them again." Rose stared at the ring. At him. "You hurt me." "I know. You hurt your boys." "I know. Give me one reason why I should trust you won't do it again." Marcus looked up at her. This woman who'd saved his family. This woman he'd tried to throw away out of pride and fear. "Because I'll spend every day for the rest of my life trying to be the father they deserve, and I can't do that without you. We need you, Rose. All 5 of us. Please come home." The boys were in their separate corners when Rose walked back through the door 6 hours later. Marcus held his breath as she entered the playroom. "Babies." Her voice was soft. "I'm back. I'm so sorry. I'm back." 4 small heads turned. 4 pairs of eyes went wide. Then chaos, the good kind. All 4 boys ran, crashed into her, wrapped around her legs, her waist, whatever they could grab, sobbing, "Rose, Rose, Rose," over and over. She sank to the floor with them, pulling all 4 into her arms. "I'm here. Mama's here. I'm never leaving again. Never. Promise?" Asher's voice was muffled against her shoulder. "I promise, baby. I promise." Marcus watched from the doorway as his sons, his 4 beautiful, Miraculous sons held on to Rose like she was the only thing keeping them anchored to earth. Maybe she was. 3 months later, they were married in the backyard. Small ceremony. The boys were ring bearers, giggling when Caleb almost dropped his. Rose wore a simple white dress. Marcus wore a grey suit and cried through his vows. "You saved us," he said, voice breaking. "Not because you had training, not because you had credentials, but because you loved us when we'd forgotten how to love ourselves." Rose's vows were simpler. "I choose you. I choose these boys. I choose this family. Every day. Forever." That night, after the boys were finally asleep, Ethan holding Rose's hand through the crib rails, Mason cuddled against her side. Caleb and Asher bookending them, Marcus and Rose sat on the back porch. "Thank you," Marcus whispered. "For what?" "For not giving up on us. For coming back. For showing me that miracles still happen." Rose leaned against his shoulder. "Miracles don't happen to people who wait. They happen to people who keep showing up, even when everything says quit." From inside, one of the boys called out, "Mama, Daddy." "We're here, baby," Rose called back. "Right here." And for the first time in 6 years, Marcus Brennan's house was full. Full of love, full of laughter, full of second chances, full of the kind of family you build with broken pieces that fit together perfectly. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.